Welcome to The Weekly, a podcast brought to you by Calvary Bible Church. I'm your host, Jay Ewing. In the booth today, we have Thomas Milburn. It's going to be a great day. So excited that you're joining in, listening in. Thanks for letting me know that you were listening in. It's always an encouragement to run into you at Walgreens or at the church. Let me know that you're listening to The Weekly. Hey, you want to go to calvarybible.com? There's a lot of great things happening at Calvary this season. Goodness gracious. You want everyone to know, you need to know, your grandkids need to know, your friends need to know, your neighbors need to know that Kids Week registration is open, as well as middle school camp. You want to go to calvarybible.com, click your campus, sign them up today. Don't miss out on these great events that happen during the summer months here at Calvary, as well as you want to know what's happening in May. calvarybible.com is the place. Love to connect with you there, and that is all my announcements today. Is that a little better than the first time when I didn't hit record?
Yeah, I think your intro's good. It's solid.
Yeah, hilarious. I had this funny intro. I like that intro, and no one will ever hear it besides you.
No. Well, it's good to be with you. What a great weekend.
Yeah, man. Post Easter Sunday.
Yeah, people are, leading up to Easter, people are asking me, are you nervous? Are you ready? It's kind of like your Super Bowl, right?
Right.
And I don't know, just not the frame of mind that I go into Easter with.
Yeah.
Is we live as resurrection people all the time. And if you're wondering what to preach on for Easter, I'd go with Jesus resurrected.
Yeah.
Like you're not coming in with like, I have a fresh new angle on this that no one has ever heard before.
You probably should say that.
I shouldn't say that. So, it's like the practice of remembering.
Yeah.
It is, we live in a faith of traditions, and the tradition to remember what has been passed on, what we have received. Is a
First
wonderful
importance.
Of first importance.
By the way, we have 50 days of actual Eastertide in the church calendar. Eastertide is 50 days leading up to Ascension Sunday, which is in May. May 26th is a Thursday, which is the official day. And then that following Sunday is when we celebrate the Ascension of Jesus.
40 days after, yeah?
Yeah, it's great. It's like 50 days, it's like 10 days something, and then 40 days.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool, pretty fun. That's actually a time where every Sunday in the church calendar, historically, is about sort of what the resurrection did to people's lives. Or what were some of the things that Jesus did after the resurrection? Because he was around for a little while.
Yeah, he is around for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're such a low church calendar community.
That's okay. Every church has its flavor, but I think it's important to understand sort of the church history of the church calendar, like we've said many times on this podcast. But it's Eastertide. So every day for the next, until the end of May, you get to wake up and practice the resurrection.
How cool is that?
Yeah, man. How do you practice a resurrection?
I think that's like what I'm doing in my life.
Okay. What? Explain.
Wouldn't you say so?
What do you mean by that?
Like there is what we talked about on Sunday. So Jesus is the first fruits of the new way of living.
Yep.
And so now I'm going to practice. I'm going to allow myself to be under the persuasion of the power of the resurrection. So let's let all that goodness have as much effect on me as possible.
Right. And they knew what they were doing because it's the springtime as well. And so we get to watch sort of the resurrection of earth too, with everything coming to green and everything budding, trees budding, flowers budding, and you mentioned it on Sunday that the tulips are the first fruits of spring.
In my yard, they are.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some botanist that's like, actually, the first flower to bloom in Colorado is
right.
Like, yeah, I'm not that smart. I just know my backyard has some of these tulips, and they're the first ones up.
Yeah, and it's just the first signs of spring. I always think of Chronicles of Narnia when it's always winter and never Christmas.
Yeah, what a great line.
And then when Aslan comes into the country, everything starts to become melting into spring.
Yeah.
It's beautiful imagery.
It is great.
Yeah. You remember those, I mean, we haven't had one this year, which is pretty crazy, but those spring snows where once the sun comes out, the dripping sound of water because everything is so heavy with moisture.
I'm waiting for that snow. Like, I really want one.
We need to.
Yeah.
It'll happen on Mother's Day this year.
Maybe. I really hope that there is some massive snowstorm still coming to Colorado.
We need it desperately.
With tons of water.
Yeah.
Little destruction.
Yeah.
Tons of water.
Tons of water. Yeah.
You think it'll happen before or after Mother's Day?
I'm going to say on Mother's Day this year.
On Mother's Day. Okay.
Yeah. It's funny because Mother's Day in Colorado gets some of the worst weather. It's for moms. Dads get in June when they can go golfing in like perfect June day in Colorado. But Mother's Day in Colorado, hailstorms.
Yeah, it's hit or miss. I did not always follow the rule of don't plant your flowers before Mother's Day. I was like, it's just so nice. I saw my neighbors dropped a ton of flowers in their on their property this last weekend.
It's tempting, right?
And I'm like, oh man, I think 18 inches of snow is still coming.
No doubt. No doubt.
Maybe not.
Yeah. But practicing resurrection is also like, just waking up every day and realizing you're in a bigger story than the one you woke up to.
Yeah, I think that's where I get the most hope from. I was talking to a gal here at Calvary this week, just passing back and forth emails of just how hard it's been in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And on Sunday, we were talking about just having the courage to navigate these days with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. So like Jesus is the evidence and the guarantee that what's coming will be coming. And just to be saying, okay, as the Christian, how this whole thing plays out. Like we're all in heaven. We're all like not impressed with each other's titles anymore. Right. No one's impressed with what they drove, what they wore, their weight, their looks. We're all really impressed with Jesus.
Yeah.
No one's harboring any bitterness towards each other. And so why don't we as the resurrection people just start living that now?
Right.
Like, let's just stop being impressed with all the things that people are really impressed with.
The invitation is actually for today.
Yeah.
It's not for tomorrow.
Yeah. I'm just like, hey, I'm going to be in heaven with you. So why would I want to harbor a grudge with you now?
Yeah. I've always said that. I'm like, we have to get along either now or we're going to get along later. So might as well just practice it now. Right.
Yeah. Which I think can go either way. Like I remember when we were doing sermons on heaven and, we were talking about people aren't going to be married in heaven, or someone had asked, are people going to be married in heaven? I said, well, the teachings of Jesus is like, you don't know that people aren't given in marriage in heaven. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, I wonder why they were asking that. It was like, this is my soulmate and surely we're going to spend heaven together, right? Or if it's like, this thing ends at some point, right?
The contract expires eventually. That's brutal. That's brutal. I've never thought of it that way.
So when they're asking, is there marriage in heaven? I'm like, I wonder why?
This is super interesting. Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, we were in a great text this weekend. Luke 24.
Luke 24.
And
the account of the first day of the week, Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah. And, all four Gospels account for the resurrection. All four have their stories. Mark is really interesting because he was actually present there. He was eyewitnesses until he fled, when he's being chased off. But Matthew has a great explanation of Jesus and why that happened. John does as well. John is really interesting because he's sitting later in life. He's read the three. He sort of knows what to add, what to leave behind. But Luke 24 is probably my favorite account. I told you that after church on Sunday. It's probably my favorite account of the resurrection.
I wonder if Luke is writing to a Gentile audience. Theophilus, we assume, is a Gentile.
Yeah.
Right? So he's going to give us a lens of Jesus, probably in like that Western, Romanian thinking.
Yeah. That's probably really true, about me.
John is, we like all the Gospels for different reasons, but I do think there's something about Luke, just even him opening up his book, like, hey, Theophilus, there's a lot of people doing this. I'm going to jump in on this. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to start just recording the facts. I'm going to go talk to all the eyewitnesses and just make for you an orderly account. And that's what Luke is, like this perfect account of how did it all go down. Mm-hmm. Like life, death, resurrection. Give me the facts.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I'm thinking of a great book to recommend for someone who wants to know the historical reliability of the resurrection, right? Case for Christ. That's probably the best one, right?
Yeah.
Written. One of the best.
Case for Christ. Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, Case for the Resurrection.
Yeah.
More Than a Carpenter,
More Than a Carpenter.
old school,
Yeah.
but still, I think it's one of the best-selling books out there. Just the evidence is. I think Kokel does some on the resurrection, which are just really good. Just, hey, let's look at the historical evidence of what people were saying, those who followed him, those who didn't follow him, those that disbelieved, those who became believers. They're all trying to figure out why the tomb's empty. Like, they all agree.
Yeah.
Jesus did the things he said he did. This is what's fascinating to me, is that all the historians are like, yep. Even like the Jewish leaders in their writings is, yeah, he did those things. We saw those things. The question is, how did he do it?
Yeah.
So you got the Romans, okay, he's doing this with magic. You got the Jews saying he's demon-possessed, and you have the scripture writer saying he's the Son of God.
Yeah. Amazing. It's crazy because once you read those books, once you start investigating, the historical reliability of the resurrection is solid. It is solid. And that's just not from a Christian perspective, just as a historical perspective, it's robust.
Yeah, Zach made this point in his Sunday message in Thornton. Like, there's more evidence for the historical Jesus Christ than there is for any other historical figure. So if you want to believe that, like, Socrates is a real person, Plato, Caesar, like, yeah, I would put more evidence into Jesus.
Yeah. It's incredible. This is incredible. So we're in Luke 24. How did you think, I was just thinking about this yesterday, reading it again. How did Luke find these two guys walking down the road in Emmaus? He wanted a historical account, but like, this is a really great story of Resurrection Sunday.
Yes, it is.
So explain.
On the road of Emmaus?
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about the road to Emmaus on Sunday.
But it's so good.
That's Easter 2023, man. Can't be letting this thing out of the bag.
Yeah. But there's two guys walking out of Jerusalem.
Yeah, so it's maybe mid-morning, I'm not sure, on the timeline. But the women, there's probably 5 of them, have come to the tomb early and seen the empty tomb, have spoken to these angelic men saying, hey, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? He's not here, as he told you he wouldn't be. Right? So this wasn't like, oh, I couldn't believe this happened, but as according to Jesus' plan. So they run back and they're telling some other disciples, and the word's getting out. So now
Jerusalem's a buzz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now these two guys are on their way to a city called Emmaus, and they're on the road, and they're walking, and Jesus walks up and joins them.
And he says, what is this conversation about? What are you talking about as you're walking together?
Yeah, which I love their responses. Are you the only person who doesn't have a clue what's going on? To the person who is the only one that understands what's going on.
It's so good.
It's so good. These two are like, do you know what's going on? And Jesus is like, yeah, you guys haven't figured this out yet.
But this is the only account we have. Luke is like, he must have been in Jerusalem investigating, taking interviews, and someone said, you've got to talk to these two dudes.
Oh, I think that's exactly what happens, right? I mean,
which shows you his robustness of investigation.
Yes, it's full, right?
You're right.
He's talking to everybody. He has talked to everybody.
Yeah, and he found out about these two guys, and he got their account of what happened when they were walking out of Jerusalem that day.
Yeah, which, honestly, when that question gets asked, sometimes like an icebreaker question, what time in history would you want to go back to? I want to be the third wheel on the road to Emmaus, because Jesus is resurrected, and it says that he begins to teach them from the scriptures all the things that had to be fulfilled, starting with, Psalms and prophets, and it's
Moses,
like, holy smokes, he's putting the whole thing together.
No doubt.
Oh,
on
man.
a walk.
On a walk.
Yeah.
So I get to be outside.
A Sunday afternoon walk.
Sunday afternoon, walking with Jesus.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
He puts the whole thing together. That just seems like the greatest time in history.
And then also, the most lovely part of this is like, they didn't recognize who he was until he broke bread with them.
Yeah.
Like, so they had met him, they had eaten with him, and they recognized, like, it's just sort of inferred among the text, right?
Yeah, so here's verse 30. So if they don't have their Bibles in front of them. So this is Jesus when he was at table with them. So these are the two men on the road to Emmaus that came into the house. He took bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. So
and then he vanished from the sight.
They vanished from the sight. And then they run over to we got to go back to Jerusalem.
Yeah. oh, turn around.
Yeah, and run back into town and go get the disciples.
Right.
But there is something here. There's actually a few accounts where no one recognizes him until, one, Jesus reveals himself to them, or two, it's around the breaking of bread.
Yeah.
Which I think is the indication of, okay, this is the Last Supper.
Totally.
This is the crucifixion.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sort of thread. It's a beautiful thread.
Yeah.
Through the scriptures. Yeah, because Peter didn't recognize him until he ate breakfast with them on the shore again.
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
So there's something about, oh man, that the last meal we had together is now connected to the meal that we're having. You are the crucified, risen Christ.
Right.
Which is just goes to this spiritual reality that's like, I can't open anyone's eyes for them. Which is, it's frustrating. I think as a parent, it's frustrating, right? You're like, gosh, if there's one thing I want to do for my kids, I want them to know who Jesus Christ is, the crucified, resurrected Christ. And I actually can't do that for them. There are so many things I get to put them around and explain and teach and hopefully model, and they create an appetite for it. But it's just like the work of God to open our eyes.
Yeah, that's so true. Gosh, such a great story. But before that, we get the 24, which you preached through. What sort of did you notice most, or what was more devotional for you as you journeyed through the text preparing for Easter?
I think for me, and I think because this is why I started the way we did on Sunday with unbelief. There's so much unbelief that's happening in the story. The women who arrive at the tomb, they're there with embalming elements.
Taking the spices they had prepared.
They're expecting to anoint his corpse still. And then he goes in and, Peter's like, I don't believe it. So he runs. And then even later on, he's like perplexed by it. And Jesus is in the room with all these disciples and they still don't believe. And then they have unbelief that's mixed with joy. They're like, I want to believe this, but I don't know how to grasp this yet. Yeah. And they need to touch and see and hear Jesus.
Yeah. It's a bodily thing too, because like even with the two on Emmaus, like Jesus was eating with them. He's not a spiritual being. He's a physical bodily being.
Yeah. Which is, I just love that because it's not that he was resuscitated or reincarnated, but he's resurrected, like visibly bodily resurrection. And that's the evidence of our future resurrection. Is it's not just like this hope of floating off as a spirit somewhere or being reincarnated. It's a physical, earthy, human resurrection.
No doubt.
But yeah, I think for me, it's like, man, all of these characters have unbelief that turns to belief, right? So for the modern person who's listening going, I just can't believe that. Like, you're in good company.
Yeah.
It'd be a different story of like, yeah, we all trusted Jesus, never doubted. And then it happened just like we thought it would.
That's more untrue.
That seems
unreliable.
unbelievable, right? You're like, that sounds a little bit more like a myth, legend. But there's so much of me in the story of like, okay, you've been journeying with Jesus for 3 years. He's told you even recently how it's all going to go down. It goes down like that, and you still don't believe.
Yep.
That's my life.
Summed it up there.
So then it's just...
You only had 3. I've done it for 20.
It's just the grace of the Lord. It's like, all right, slow of faith. Come here.
Yeah.
Come here, Thomas. Slow of faith.
So true. So true. Talk about a little bit about why is it important that the stone was already rolled away when the women got there?
Well, this is my conjecture. I don't know.
No, that's good. This is the podcast where you conjecture. It's a conversation. It's the conversation between the Sundays, sort of just the real life, what we're talking about.
Yeah. I think I joke about it on Easter, but forever I just assumed that the stone was rolled away so that Jesus could get out, thinking that he had conquered death, rose to life, and then was like stuck in his tomb.
Like, oh, I guess I'll move this.
Yeah, like waiting for some angels to roll it out. He's like, oh man, there he is.
Yeah.
But no, the stone being rolled away so that the women and that Peter can come in and investigate.
Yeah.
There's like an invitation to come and see what has been done. And I think it's just symbolic for us of, hey, that's an open invitation for us to come and see. Like,
that's right.
Don't just take this on blind faith, not because it feels good, not because you hope the story to be true, but come and investigate, ask all the questions, and see if this is really true or not.
Yeah, so if you're listening today and that's you just need to come and see, investigate. Yeah. That's the invitation for us with the stone, is that we get to peer into what has actually happened.
Which, I mean, like for the modern person, maybe you grab the Gospel of Luke, right? So Luke is writing, just here's all the facts from the eyewitness interviews that I conducted. And maybe you just want to grab the book of Luke and just start reading everything reading it and asking questions about everything. Like, what's an angel? What's a Sabbath? What's a Pharisee?
Yeah.
Who's a Sadducee? And
why does he say going down or going up in the text? Because that's important.
It's great. And so then to start, getting together with maybe someone from your life group or a local pastor or one of us and asking those questions and putting the pieces together.
Yeah, super cool.
How about for you? What hits you in this story? I mean, there's so many different elements, but even just maybe on Easter, what was rising to maybe a new level or just a remembrance of, oh yeah, that's how that went down?
The linen cloth in the tomb, you made mention of that. Like, if you were going to steal the body, you'd probably take the linen cloth because something to carry it with. You wouldn't have to touch dead skin, dead flesh.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't, why would you, if you're going to rob the tomb, like that was a theory, someone robbed it, you didn't take the valuable thing in the tomb, which was the linen cloth. It was still there. And I think that's really important for us to remember. Let me sum it up this way. I think the historical, factual reliability of the resurrection was what I took away this year, and it just blessed me to think about that once again. It's like, oh yeah, this thing is so historically accurate, that, and I've read those books, but it's just good to remember, like, my faith is not built on some myth. It's built on a reality of history.
Yeah. And
I can take that to the bank, and that's where faith is still a step into the unknown. Pascal says it's a leap, but it's a short leap for me when I think about the historical reliability of it.
I think even for me practically, for today, looking at this story of living the resurrection, there's so much about my own personal life where it just feels disorienting, right? Like, what is going on? Where is Jesus? Right? Have you ever asked that question? Like, what is going on? Where is Jesus?
Right.
And the women, they come to the tomb, and I think that's the two questions. Like, what is going on? Like, actually, where is Jesus? But where is Jesus? And the messengers, I love this in verse 6. He is not here, but he is risen. And then he tells them this: remember. So when you ask this question, what's going on? Where is Jesus? The messengers of God tell the people of God, remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the third day rise. And they remembered his words. And I think that's for me, when I ask, what's going on? Where is Jesus? I think the invitation is, can you remember what God has told you? Can you remember the things he's already said? He said you're going to have troubles and tribulations in this world, but take heart, he's overcome the world. He said that he has authority over all things in heaven and earth. He said he'll never leave you or forsake you. He has told, it's like you just go through all of the things that I should just remember. Like, just remember what Jesus has already said. And that will help you helps me navigate what is going on, where is Jesus, and just be pointed back to, remember what he's already told you, Thomas. Those will be the words to navigate these uncertain times.
Oh, man. Okay, let's talk about, we got just a few minutes. Let's talk about the importance of the women being the first ones to the tomb.
Yeah.
And Luke, Luke's gospel is about the women are the first ones to get it, to understand who Jesus is. It's a theme through Luke. He loves to prop up the women's faith, and especially in the first century. That's a pretty radical sort of document.
Yeah, it's one of the points we briefly made on Sunday. It's made very often in apologetics of the reliability of your scriptures are one of the indicators that you're reading a true story, is it has embarrassing facts about the people that it's highlighting. So if all of the quote-unquote heroes of the story never have any problems, you're probably reading myth. If the writers are recording or being even allowing to be recorded embarrassing things about themselves, which all the Gospels do, right?
Right.
The disciples look like middle school children sometimes.
Most of the time.
It's like a real life,
Yeah.
So historically, you got to kind of take your stuff out of the modern mind. Historically, like you're saying, first century historians would actually use this as evidence not to believe the story. Mm-hmm. So writing during kind of the days of after Jesus, there were many that said, you can't believe this story because the first witnesses of the resurrection were women.
And they can't even be in court.
They can't testify in court.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
unreliable.
They're unreliable in the first century system, right? So,
but the beauty of the gospel is changing that.
Yeah.
Even from the resurrection.
From the resurrection, Jesus is elevating what the world has devalued. Mm-hmm. And as the modern, you don't pick up on that and say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that there are women as the first eyewitnesses."
Yeah.
We'd probably be like, "That's probably more reliable."
Yeah, we know how that works.
Yeah, that's probably truer. But the first century, what's the reason of doing that? It actually doesn't create any credibility for you if you're going to start the story in that cultural context. Mm-hmm. The only reason you do that is if that's what actually happened, and your job is to record the facts.
Yep. And it's so beautiful that, so many times we get the critique that the church doesn't care about women. You're like, they were the first disciples of Jesus.
Yeah.
They are so important to us.
Yeah.
They're so valued.
Not even at the resurrection, right? But even at the crucifixion.
Right.
All the dude disciples are gone.
They bolted, except John.
Maybe John, if he's the disciple whom Jesus loved. If that wasn't Lazarus, but I don't know. Question for another day.
That's a rabbit hole, rabbit holes.
But anyway, but everyone who's there are his female disciples.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're there. They bury him, and then they go back to the grave on Sunday.
Though the male figures that are so intriguing to me at crucifixion are, maybe there's three of them, but really two is Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea.
Yep. Because they buried Jesus.
They go ask for the body and bury him.
That's audacious. You don't do that of a criminal.
That is the story of Nicodemus. So he's a Pharisee, right? Pharisee, Sadducee?
Yeah, Pharisee.
And in his first encounter in the book of John, he's super interested in Jesus, but he won't allow himself to be seen publicly with Jesus. He's too embarrassed.
He comes at night.
So he comes at night to ask his questions. But then the book ends with Nicodemus in the most public way saying, I'm gonna care for the body of Jesus. Yeah. That's faith.
That is. And so many people have thrown shade on that. Well, you don't know that, but you're like, no, that dude has to have faith.
Totally.
To go up and say, I'm going to bury that guy.
To be fair, we don't know.
We don't.
But we can ask him when we get to heaven.
That's because he's there. So good. But, I love Luke because the pedestal that women get put on, and rightly so, is so evident in his gospel.
Super intentional. No, I think actually all the gospel writers are doing that.
Yeah, no doubt.
They're showing who had just, I don't know, that loyalty and deep love and affection, and without fear stood up with Jesus.
Yeah, it's incredible. What a great Sunday. What a great story. What a great reality that we're living in as resurrected people. Super cool, man. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Jay.
I'm glad
it's great to be with you.
Glad you're in the booth. Calvary, we're so thankful for you. Thanks for listening in. If you have questions about the resurrection, the historical reliability, don't hesitate to reach out to Thomas, myself. You can write theweekly at calvarybible.com. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you found a great book that's helpful in your sort of historical, authentic, apologetical type understanding of the Gospels, we'd love to hear that from you as well. Also, Calvary, you can find out what's happening here in your neck of the woods. Just go to calvarybible.com, click your campus, click those events, and get plugged in, because come and see, investigate the risen Son of God. Okay, we love you. Have a great week.